Hey, Seth here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Nextcloud using Docker and Docker Compose. Quick note, I'm not a professional sysadmin or developer. I have a background in IT, but really I'm just a hobbyist sharing what I've learned. So if you're new into self-hosting, you're in the right place. I'm using Pop! OS, but these steps should work on any Linux system running Docker. This tutorial is for beginners to intermediate users. If you're comfortable with the command line and have some basic Linux experience, you'll be able to follow along. Before we start, you'll need Docker and Docker Compose already installed, a text editor, and about 15 minutes. I'll put links to everything in the description, so let's get started. Now for the fun part. Almost everything we're going to be doing in this video is going to be in the terminal itself, so you'll need to have that open. And the only other thing you'll need is a browser. So once we get the Nextcloud app up and running, we want to verify it's working. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is make a directory for our Docker Compose file. Now, I like to put this in a special Docker folder that has all my containers in it. It's up to you where you want to put yours, but I have a specific folder that I like to put mine in. So let me just change my directory to that now. Okay, and I'm just going to show if there's any files in here, but the ls command, and there's nothing. Before we get started in the Docker Compose file itself, there's one thing we need to check on our computers, and that's that port 8080 is available, or if it's used. And if it's used, we want to find another unassigned port that we can map to Nextcloud. So let me show you how to go about doing that. So the first command you're going to run is this ss command, and we're looking for specifically for port 8080. And as you can see here, I've got an app listening on port 8080 for both IPv4 and IPv6. So we need to find another port number that won't have a conflict. Now, if you don't have a conflict on yours and it didn't turn up any results, you're safe to use 8080. And if you don't know what I'm getting at about that yet, you'll see in a few minutes what I'm referring to. But just trust me on this one. We want to check this first. Now, for the sake of this demo environment that I use for these YouTube videos, I'm going to use ports 5322 through 5342, but we still have to make sure that they're available to use and not mapped to anything else. Here's the command that you're going to paste in here. And as long as we don't see the red light, which, I could have just done this easily and it reported nothing, but I thought I'd add a little flair to the video. We don't have any red lights stopping us. All right, so now we're ready to create our Nextcloud folder. So inside this Docker folder, I'm going to create a directory. And in mine, I'm just going to call it Nextcloud Demo. You don't have to add the demo part to yours. You can name it whatever you want, really. I find it easier just to keep it as Nextcloud. Okay, just make sure it's there. Okay, so now we have that directory in there. The next thing I'm going to do is to create a port mapping text file for my own purposes. Like, I know you can use commands to check what ports are open, etc., but I find it a little faster as you build up this environment. You have more Docker containers to know exactly what ports map to what container. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use Nano. You can use whatever text editor you like. And then we're going to call it port mapper.txt. Okay, and then on the top, I'm just going to put one column for the port and another column for the container. And in this case, for the Nextcloud container, I'm going to use port 5322. That's the first one available. And we're going to call this the Nextcloud container. And that's it for now. So we'll hit Control X in my case, Y, yes, enter. And now we should be able to see that there. That doesn't really do anything other than let us get the information very quickly and track everything. Nothing to do with this Docker Compose file. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to. Okay, the next step, before we get into the Docker Compose file, this is something I like to add for a security purpose. It's just like a little added layer of security. It might even be superficial. Again, I'm not a sysadmin or a developer, and it's just something I learned recently. The next thing we're going to do is add an environment file that's going to have all of our variables in there. That includes our passwords, usernames, the database information, etc. And in order to do that, we're going to once again, well, first we got to get into our Nextcloud folder. So let's change the directory to Nextcloud demo. And there's nothing in here, as you can see. And we're going to sudo nano.env. Okay, and in here, and I'm going to share this with you. This will be in the description. I'm going to paste this in here. Control-Shift-V to paste into nano. And let's go over this. In the docker-compose file, we need, for Nextcloud, we need a database and an app server. And what we're going to do in this case is we have to have a password for MySQL, the root password, the MySQL password, and the MySQL user, as well as the database name. And then once we get to the app part for Nextcloud, you need a username for the admin account. So just going over this here, my root password, and you really should change this. This is just for a demo, but you can change your root password here. I recommend not using the same password for anything else. As far as the database and the user, I wouldn't change that unless you really have a strong preference for something else. And then the Nextcloud admin user and password are going to be the account that you log in with once we finally get this done and launch Nextcloud and go to the web interface, and you can really get into the admin settings there. You could change the admin name and password on yours. If you prefer a specific username, do that. You don't have to keep it as admin, and definitely don't keep it as admin123. When you're done with that, again, hit Control X if you're using Nano, hit Y, and enter, and then list. It's not showing up, but unless you're not familiar with Linux, if you do ls-a, it shows the hidden files there. So that's good to go now. Now we can move on to the docker-compose file. And the good thing with docker-compose is when we set up our config, it's automatically going to look for the .env file as long as we have variables listed in that docker-compose file, which we do. So let me show you that now. Sudo nano, and we're going to call this one docker-compose.yml. Okay, and then hit enter. And then let me go ahead and grab the config that I used, and I'll go through it as best I can. Okay, Control-Shift-V. Let's go to the start. Okay, the first service we have here is the database. And we're going to go down to the environment here. And now you can see these are the variables that are inside the environment file that we created. So it's just going to automatically look for those. You can, if this is just something you're hosting for yourself, no one else is going to access it, it's not going to be publicly accessible, you can just put the database password, the root password, everything in here directly, but it's not as secure. It's up to you though. The other thing I want to cover is the demo net. So down here is your network defined. This is your Docker network. I'm setting this particular one up as a bridge, which means that it's just going to use the IP address associated with my computer, not a separate subnet that's going to be on my computer. It's a little simpler that way. You can do it however you want. Also, the changing of the name, you can change it to just net or Nextcloud-net. I'm just using demo-net because I'm going to use this network more than likely for all of the other containers I'm going to create in this demo environment. If you do change it, you do need to go into each of these services, so DB and app, and as you can see, you need to change it right here. It needs to be exactly how you listed it. All right, so if you just change it as .net, if you change it down there to net, you need to change this to net, and then this one here as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and revert that, because I'm going to keep it as demo-net. And then the other thing we need to change is the ports. Now, if you were lucky enough and port 8080 is available to use and nothing else is using it right now on your computer, simply just change this to 8080. That's it. However, if you're like me and you went with port 5322 or any other port, you do have to make sure that it is here. Other than that, you shouldn't have to change anything at all in this config. Now, we can get into way more detailed environment commands and other ways to set this up, but this is like, I'm using the KISS method, just keep it simple, stupid. This is what works for me. So now we're done with that. We're going to hit Control X again, Y, Enter. And now we have our Docker Compose file. Now, how do we get the Docker container spun up and access our Nextcloud? Super easy. Simple command. Docker compose up-d. And as you can see, it did just create the network, the container for the database and for the app. And then we can verify if that's working. You go to http://localhost, again, and then whatever port number you use. So if you use 8080, put 8080. If you use 5322 like I did, type that in there and then just go ahead and hit enter. And voila, Nextcloud is up and working here. Let's make sure we can get into it. So in my case, it was admin and the super complex password of admin123. And we're not going to save that. I got in. Now, I have done this in the past and I've got a token mismatch error. All you have to do is just refresh the page and then try logging in again. That's always worked for me. So we're going to go ahead and close out of here and go to our files. And now you have your own self-hosted version of iCloud, Google Drive, OneDrive, whatever you want to refer to. This is it. Now your data is really private because it's only on your computer, and you can access this through any computer on your home network or phone. There's apps for Nextcloud that you can use as well. If you need to access this from outside of your home network, there's ways to do that too. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, leave a comment down below to let me know. And if I get enough requests, I'll definitely make one on this. Now, if you start using this and you're coming from Google Drive or Office 365 and you're missing the Office app functionality like Word or Docs, spreadsheets, etc., you can install only Office in here with only a few clicks. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, click on that video up there. Take it easy.